Good morning to everyone. Michael, can you please call the roll?
Alderman Bob Bauman.
Here.
Mr. Mark Flaherty. Mr. Jim Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Scott Mansky.
Here.
Mr. Greg Marcus. Ms. Aicha Sawa.
Here.
Mr. Grady Crosby.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, fantastic. Having a quorum present, we will get going with our first order of business, which is approval of the minutes from our last committee meeting, which you received in anticipation of this meeting. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes from our last meeting of April 8th. Are there any changes, corrections, questions? If not, it would be appropriate to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that is unanimous. So next, we'll just continue to move forward with our agenda. We have a financial update from Mr. Steve Marsh, and I'll pass it off to Steve this time.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and good morning, everyone. The 2021 financial update is a bit brief today. I just want to be sure there's adequate time for Baker Tilly to walk through their audit presentation. And frankly, the update hasn't changed from last month's board meeting. Our forecast relative to budget has remained static, and we've made no updates since the April report, as noted on the 8th page of today's committee packet, which is the income statement that has column IDs M, N, O, and P at the top. I expect by the June board meeting that we will have more certainty around the 2021 event calendar, and we'll adjust our forecast projections accordingly, good, bad, or indifferent. If we flip back to the income statement on page 5 of the committee packet, with column IDs A, B, C, and D at the top, you'll see a comparison of year-to-date actual results versus year-to-date budget. Jumping to the bottom of the page first, you'll see on line 67, column C, net income is down from budget by $5.1 million. As we've discussed at prior committee meetings this year, most of the variance is driven by the increase in bond interest expense, line 65, due to the issuance of expansion debt in December of 2020, which was not projected in the 2021 budget. Additionally, line 35, column C, you'll see tax revenues are down relative to budget.
Steve, could you pause and just tell Joel? Morning, Joel. Just let Joel know what page we're on. So.
Morning, Joel. We're on page 5 of the committee packet.
Great. Thanks, Steve.
Line 35, column C, you'll see tax revenues are down relative to budget. If you recall at the January 2021 board meeting, we reforecasted tax revenue projections down relative to budget. And we're expecting to get the March tax revenue results later this month. And that will better inform us of how we adjust our projections for the remainder of the year. For now, we're maintaining the forecast we established in January. Up to line 29, net operating income. To date, we're better than budget by just over $1 million. Much of that positive variance is due to the vaccination clinic event we've been hosting since January. Additionally, we've seen positive net income from hosting several dance competitions and volleyball tournaments in the theater and exhibit halls in the month of March. As I just mentioned at the start of the update, we do expect to have more certainty around third and fourth quarter event activity by next board meeting, and we'll be prepared to discuss any adjustments to forecasts we believe are necessary. Non-operating expenses, you'll see quite a bit of variation between budget and actual results, which is not too uncommon for this time of year. The biggest variance is the Visit Milwaukee fee, line 50. The reduction in that expense is a direct result of a decrease in tax revenue collections. One last note on the income statement, you'll see on line 39, column B, Bucks District Ticket Surcharge revenue is at $35,000 approximately. The Bucks began admitting fans into Fiserv Forum at a limited capacity in the month of March. And with the announcement earlier this week that the Bucks expect to be at 50% capacity for playoff games, we are optimistic that this number will continue to grow. Are there any questions on the 2021 income statement? Okay. To the cash flow projections, page 9 and 10 of your packet. Not much has changed here from last meeting. We're still projecting relatively healthy, restricted, and unrestricted cash balances for year end. Management has no concerns about its ability to meet its debt and operational obligations for the remainder of the calendar year. And just a quick follow-up to a possible issue we raised at the April board meeting. We discussed the impact that a potential sales tax holiday bill would have on the district's tax collections in 2021. We were estimating approximately a $2.7 million reduction should it become law. At this time, there are no new updates on the matter. Consistent with the statement Senator Darling made at our last board meeting, a companion bill to the one the Assembly passed in April has not been taken up at the Senate at this time. Again, we'll continue to monitor and report to the board any updates we may have on the situation. But at this time, I don't believe there's anything to be concerned about. Are there any questions regarding cash balances or the 2021 financial report today? Okay. Well then, Mr. Vice Chairman, I'll turn the floor over to Wendy Unger of Baker Tilly to brief the committee on the audit of the district's 2020 financial statements.
Thanks, Steve. Wendy?
All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Included in your packet, I believe beginning on page 11, is the handout, which is a high-level summary of the other two draft documents that you should have included in your packet. I'm going to go through those draft documents utilizing this handout at a relatively high level. Please feel free to ask any questions as we move through the presentation. I will also plan to do a similar presentation to the board on next week, Friday, but at a much, probably a much higher level than what we'll go through today. Our agenda for this discussion is to talk about the objective of the audit and the opinion that we plan to issue. Also go through some very high-level financial statement highlights, and then we'll conclude our discussion with the reporting and insights document that you also have in draft format. Turning to the next page of the handout, the objective of the audit is to render an opinion on the financial statements for the district. We intend to issue a clean, unmodified opinion. That is the highest level of assurance that you can obtain from us as your auditors. That's a positive thing. What that unmodified opinion means is that the financial statements are believed to be materially accurate, that the disclosures that are required to be included under our standards are included, that we have followed generally accepted accounting principles, and that accounting principles have been consistently applied from year to year. For 2020, there was no new governmental accounting standards or GASBs that were effective for the district, so there's no emphasis of matters paragraph related to that. However, we do continue to have an emphasis of matters paragraph referring to footnote 17 regarding the going concern discussion, and a lot of the content of that footnote is information that Steve shared previously during his 2021 update. Moving on to the highlights from the audit. And again, the next several pages are information that is in a more summarized format of information that is contained within the draft documents. I'm going to touch on a few high points. What I've included on page 5 is a comparison of your statement of net position 2020 compared to 2019. You'll note within your total asset category a significant increase. You'll note current assets are down approximately 7.5 million, and there's really two items that contribute to that fluctuation. One is operating cash. Operating cash is down approximately $4 million, and also your tax revenue receivable, which is typically around $6 million, is down to $3 million due to less tax revenue being generated. The non-current asset section, $451 million increase. This is within several categories. One is within the restricted cash section. That portion is up $442 million. Most of that is your construction money that was borrowed during 2020 that is sitting in cash until you spend it for your project. Also prepaid insurance. That saw an increase of approximately $24 million. That is related to the insurance that is again associated with the new debt obligations. And then there was some fluctuation in your capital asset activity, and we'll touch on that activity in a moment on the next page. The deferred outflow of resources section, this is a section that accounts for any losses on refunding, also accounts for any activity related to pension or OPEB. The large fluctuation in there is due to the loss on refunding that occurred because of the refundings that were done. And again, I'll speak to that in a moment. The liabilities section also saw a significant increase from $403 million in 2019 to $882 million in 2020. Current liabilities are down. That's really due to the short-term portion of your long-term debt. Saw a decrease due to the restructuring that was done. But your long-term liabilities saw roughly a $484 million increase due to the new long-term obligations that the district has entered into. Deferred inflows, very consistent with previous year. Net position, you'll note $193 million last year, down to $162 million this year, so a decrease of $30.8 million. Again, we will look at the statement of activities and see the reason for that fluctuation in a moment. On the next page of the handout, this is where I've summarized the capital asset activity and the long-term debt summary for the district. Again, in comparison to 2019, your total capital asset activity saw a decrease of approximately $15 million. That fluctuation is really made up of a couple different components. One is you have a very large depreciation figure that flows through on an annual basis that equates to roughly $20 million on an annual basis. You also saw an increase in your construction in progress. You had approximately $2.2 million of costs incurred for the new expansion project. And again, those sit in construction in progress until the project is completed and then will begin to be depreciated. Also during 2020, there was some additional capital assets purchased or received, $3 million approximately, and those related to, there was some escalator work that was done, arena lighting, and then some sidewalk work on 6th Street. So overall, again, a decrease in your capital asset activity that is reflected on your statement of net position. Then within your long-term debt portion of that table, again, I've mentioned previously that the new obligations that the district entered into during 2020 equated to roughly $526 million of new obligations. A portion of that was for your expansion project and a portion refunded existing debt, the 1996A obligations and the 1999 obligations. So again, some existing debt was paid down, but some additional new debt was incurred for those two purposes. Moving to the next page of the presentation, this is the results of operations, your income statement. Again, I don't know that I'm sharing any information that the committee is not already fully aware of from 2020 due to the pandemic, significant decreases in activity. But just to touch on a few items, the total operating section down $11.5 million. A significant portion of this is due to the commission on concessions. That's approximately $5 million in 2019. That figure was essentially zero in 2020. Also, space and equipment rental was down $2.5 million, and then box office activity also down $2.5 million over the previous year. Likewise, operating expenses were also down over the previous year by approximately $6 million. The allocated operating expenses, you'll note, saw a decrease of roughly $4 million over the previous year. Again, cost-saving measures that were taken. Wages were down $2.2 million. Utilities were down almost $1 million. If you remember, in 2019, there was some cleanup of the old box office ledger. So there was roughly $1 million expense in 2019 that didn't exist in 2020. The only consistent within that operating expense category is, again, the depreciation that I referred to previously. The non-operating section, you'll see $27.7 million in 2019, down to $4.8 million in 2020. Again, several reasons for that. The room tax revenue food and beverage revenue, car rental tax, all down roughly $20 million over the previous year. Your $8 million from the state and the county, again, remained consistent. You had additional bond issuance costs, so your interest expense fluctuated upward during the year due to those additional costs. And then your other income category, which includes your investment income, which also saw a downward trend in 2020. That figure also included, that $632,000 also included some additional grant revenue that the district received in 2020 to the tune of roughly $232,000. So overall, again, the fluctuations in those various sections led the results of operation of a decrease in that position of $30.8 million, resulting in the $162 million ending net position for 2020. On the next page, not going to go into great detail. I think I've explained most of the fluctuations that have existed within the cash flow, but overall, the cash position of the district did increase by the $438 million at the bottom of the page. And again, most of that is that borrowed money that is sitting in your restricted cash category for future construction needs. Also, there was some additional monies that were borrowed from the debt standpoint for future debt payments and capitalized interest in that type of activity that existed during the borrowing phase. Switching gears on the final page of the presentation, the reporting and insights document that we issue as part of the financial statement audit. I've summarized that in 5 bullet points included on this page. Again, that document is in draft format, and we utilize that document to accomplish a couple different purposes. One is to communicate comments and recommendations that may come up as part of the audit process, allows us to have our standard and customary communication that we need to have with those charged with governance. So included in that report for 2020 continues to be a material weakness related to the fact that we prepare the financial statements as your auditors, and that there are a couple of material journal entries that we do as part of the audit process. Neither of these are new or different than what has been done in the past. The material journal entries are all associated with the accounting activity for the OPEB and the pension. So we don't find any audit entries that relate to operational type items. For example, payables or receivable revenue or expenses. These are both related to that activity. I'm also happy to say that in the past we had a weakness noted for segregation of duties over the payroll process, and that material weakness was addressed during the year and is no longer reported in the report. So nice progress made by management on resolving that. Also included in that report, two-way communication regarding our audit. That's really solicitation for feedback for future audits, and that's found on the very last pages of that report. There continues to be an IT best practice comment in there, really just something for management's consideration, nothing that is of a significance or material weakness type scenario. The required communication section of that report, again, that's the portion we use as your auditors to communicate what we need to under our standards. One of the most important sections in there, in my opinion, is the section that highlights the various estimates that are included within the district's financial statements. There are 3. One is your other post-employment benefit obligations, your pension obligations, and depreciation. As I noted previously, depreciation is $20 million based on an estimated useful life on a straight line basis. So again, a significant estimate. And then again, your pension and OPEB liabilities are based on actuarial data that is provided to the district, and again, based on estimations of retirement dates, benefits that will be paid, and that type of item. That section also includes the dollar amounts of the 2 entries that we made as part of the OPEB and pension adjustments. And then again, the only other item I would bring to your attention in that section is, again, we reference the going concern footnote that has been included in the footnotes for the district, bringing the readers up to date on the status of 2021. Lastly, on this page, I referred to the management representation letter. This is a document that will be issued upon approval next week by the board. This is a document that management represents certain things that are done as part of the audit process, information that is shared with us. Nothing, the content of that letter is not new or different. And again, that will be signed and provided to us in final format after next week's meeting. There is a copy in the reporting and insights document for your reference and for your review. But again, nothing new or different included in that letter that I need to draw to your attention. Included in your packets, again, are both of the draft documents. At this point, that is the presentation that I have prepared, but would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have regarding either the documents, the audit process, or the presentation.
Looks like Scott has a question.
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions from committee members at this point? Yeah, we got Scott with his hand up. Scott?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the audit report and I have a couple of questions. So starting on page 6 of the audit report, which is page 31 of the full document that was handed out. Okay.
Yeah.
So the second paragraph in there, it talks about the second component of the accumulated. So it says that there is a net position deficit of 75 million. The deficit consists of capital appreciation bonds of 56 million. And then it talks about the second component, and it says an accumulation of surpluses and deficits. And it says the 20 million in net surplus. Should that be net deficit?
Correct.
Because that just seems to indicate that those two should be offset against each other.
Correct. We'll make that update to the MD&A.
Then going to page 10. Page 10, which is the balance sheet. Prepaid insurance went from 1.7 million to 24 million. Is there any reason for that?
Yes, that was the additional insurance that was part of the borrowings that were done during 2020 on the new debt.
Okay. You also talked, there were refundings that occurred for these debt issues, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And there is a footnote that is included within your audited statements on page 36.
Right. But on page 13 then? In the cash flows? I don't see any refundings here.
Are you referring to under the non-cash section for those amounts?
Cash flows from capital and related?
So the refundings are included within the debt issued, the borrowed portion, and then the actual payments are included in the principal payments.
So they're not separately shown?
They're not on here currently. If you would like us to break them out, we would be happy to do that if that would be more informational.
No, so where is the refunding, the payment for the refunding?
It's
In
included as part of the principal payment
payments.
on bonds payable.
Oh,
Would you like that broken out?
it doesn't lead you to any conclusion that there was a refunding on this page.
Yeah, that.
And then I guess I have a question on page 23. So the money that is being held in custodial accounts for the debt issuance, is that money just being held in deposit accounts?
Yes, I believe so.
Deposit accounts, is it being invested at all? Is it just sitting in a zero interest account?
No, Scott, some of the monies are being invested. Not all. We're keeping some monies liquid enough to continue to pay expenses as they occur during the project. But part of the borrowing plan was earning interest income off of the debt proceeds to fully fund the project budget.
So was none of it invested at the end of the year?
That's possible. Most of that money came to us December 16th, Scott, when entered into our account. And I think at that time we were still finalizing the investment strategy with Robert W. Baird and working with US Bank to get those monies invested. So if I recall correctly, it may not have gone in until 2021.
So you can invest it?
There's limits on what we can invest in. I think, Kirk, by statute or the general resolution, we're limited on what we can invest monies into.
I'm not positive offhand.
Yeah,
but
it's very restrictive as to where this money can go.
Not a high risk yield.
Yeah.
But it is contemplated that during the term that we're holding these monies, that there is interest income because that gets us to the full amount needed to fund the project.
That's right.
I guess and then on page 23, the full dollar amount is uninsured and uncollateralized.
Mr. Mansky, I believe that's because of, again, as Steve mentioned, as of the end of the year, those monies had just come in. They had not been invested in anything that was collateralized or insured at that point. So the only coverage that was available was the $250,000 of FDIC coverage.
Right. Did that provide any concern to Baker Tilly?
Not necessarily at your end, because as of the time of the audit, the discussion was had about the investment already being taken care of.
Okay. Those were my questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for going through it.
Yes. Good questions. Any other questions? Comments? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Steve, and your team for being able to deliver a unmodified report. It's our duty next week at the board meeting to approve the audit. So at this point, to aid the board in the discussion next week, I would entertain a motion from this committee, from the Finance Committee, to recommend approval of the audit to the full board at next week's meeting. Do I have such a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that this committee would recommend approval of this audit to the board, to the full board next week. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Great, we'll take that as a unanimous recommendation from the Finance Committee to the board next week for approval of the audit that we've just gone through this morning. So thank you all for that. So we'll keep moving. We'll go to Marty with the CEO update. Marty?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making yourselves available to today's committee meeting. Not a lot to go through. Would like to echo Steve's comments that we are encouraged on the event side of the activities we're seeing, the inquiries we're seeing. Really most recently this week with the announcement by the health department that both the Brewers and Bucks can go to 50% capacity. We've already seen this week an uptick in inquiries and callbacks from our outbound calls for people who are looking to book events for FY21 and then early 22. So as Steve indicated, while we're encouraged, we're not prepared in the May board meeting to modify our forecast, but we expect in June to have a better handle on the likelihood of these inquiries developing into confirmed events for fiscal 21, and we'll make you apprised of our recommendation at the June board meeting. Vaccination clinic continues through the end of May, and that has been a very helpful addition to our schedule. Unbudgeted, it has helped us address some of the otherwise shortfalls that we had not anticipated. Ticket sales for the Beyond Van Gogh exhibit still continue to have strong sales. I'm pleased to report that the event, as we sit here today, at the very least is profitable, and hopefully as we get further into the early summer, and if we're fortunate enough to extend the event through November, will be even more profitable. This was an unbudgeted event for this fiscal year, and hopefully will enable us to pick up any further shortfalls that we see along the way. But it's been a terrific addition to our schedule, and we're very excited to have been able to capture. We're hopeful that getting this type of residency, while it's the first time for us, we're hopeful that it will enable us to get into this market and pursue other events of this nature that we can put in for several months using the exhibition hall. As we've discussed last month, and Steve mentioned this month, we have hosted a number of volleyball tournaments, dance competitions, and a basketball event in the exhibition hall. Overall, for the most part, they've gone off without issues. We did have a number of isolated and somewhat volatile confrontations with some attendees at the basketball tournament and one or two of the dance tournaments as it pertained to adhering to the mask requirement. We were able to address them. We did react to it in that we contacted all of our upcoming events and reinforced the need to support our staff for the masking requirement, and all have complied. So it was a little bit of a hiccup for one event in particular, but one that we were able to control and have taken the appropriate actions to make sure that they don't come up again. Part of the challenge with it really was that there were, specifically the basketball tournament, did have a high number of out-of-state attendees who were coming from areas where there were no mask restrictions. So they were quoting the fact that the state mask restriction had been lifted, and we had to communicate to them that we follow the city health department's ordinances. And we got through it, but I just want to make you aware this has not been without some isolated issues. For the board meeting next week, Mike Abrams from ICON will be giving you an update, and we've also invited and we'll have Sal Alani, who is one of the lead designers from TVS here. She's going to take us through updated and more current renderings, really looking at the inside of the building, which is something we've not focused on up to this point. And if all goes well on the design side, there'll be a fly-through to give us all a real-life perspective of the interior and exterior of what we've got on the drawing board. Along those lines, with the expansion, I continue to be asked to give presentations of what the expansion is and what it means to Milwaukee. Last week, I gave a presentation to the Rotary Club of Milwaukee, and then on Friday of last week, gave a presentation via the Visit Milwaukee weekly webinar. Again, if anyone has a group that would like to hear from us about what the expansion is and what it means, happy to do so. As reported in the last committee and board meeting, we did bring back those individuals who were on furlough, so everyone effective last Monday is working a full 40-hour week, and a number of the individuals who were laid off have been called back to support the uptick in event activity. Last night, I've not gotten the final event report from it, but we hosted the first large private catered event in the ballroom. We had the Right to Life organization have their annual function in our ballroom, and there were over 550 people scheduled to attend. I don't have the exact count, but I'm sure if there had been a problem, I would have heard last night, not waiting to see something in writing. So as far as the items to discuss in open session, that's really the extent of the CEO report. There is an issue that I would like to address, but based upon its sensitivities, Kurt, I don't know if you want to say anything about the rationale why, but I would like, Mr. Vice Chair, if we could go into closed session, that would enable me to continue the discussion.
Yeah, we can accommodate that. Wanted to see if anyone had any questions about your comments that you made in open session, though. Any questions for Marty? All right, hearing none, Marty did request that a portion of his report be received in closed session. So at this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to section 19.851E of the Wisconsin Code for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business where competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. The committee will reconvene in open session following the closed session discussion of this agenda item. Do I have such motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? All right, unanimously, we will at this time go into closed session. So I will ask that all committee members, those individuals
13, 12, 11, 10, 9,
Good to go.
8, 7.
We beat you. We
Gotta
beat
keep
you
them
all.
honest, Scott. Gotta keep them honest, man. Gotta keep them honest around here. All right. It looks to me that everybody seems to be assembled. The only other thing on our agenda, though, is just to look at the agenda review and see if there's any comments on the board meeting agenda. I don't see it in my packet for, maybe it's at another page. I don't see any, I don't see it on my, in my materials, the board meeting agenda for our board meeting coming up.
Governance, we'll provide that, usually do.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll pass on that. I guess it will be sent out prior to the meeting, Marty.
It'll go out early next week.
All right, so when it does, if you have any questions or comments, please address them with Jim. And they'll make any further determinations on that. The only other thing is our future meeting dates. And you see the next one is our full board meeting coming up on May 21st next week. And then this committee will reconvene on June 10th. Any other thing on that, Michael?
No, that's all.
All right. Are there any future committee discussion items that anyone wants to bring to our attention for future finance committee meetings? And of course, if you don't have any right now, if you do come up with any, please let Jim or Marty know, and they'll make sure those are properly addressed. So that's all that we have, and we're a little over time, and I appreciate everyone's patience in staying with us today for all the important information we covered. But as always, appropriate to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Can we get a second?
No, how come Scott puts more energy into his audit questions than motion to adjourn? Come on, Scott, give it some oomph.
It's just his nature. I assume there's no discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 There you go, Scott. With that resounding confirmation, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all. See you Friday.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.